All right, so ready to dive into a real Thanksgiving classic.
Oh, you bet. Always up for a good movie deep dive.
You know, planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah, a classic. I feel like everyone watches it around this time of year.
Exactly. But we're going to go a little deeper today, like behind the scenes, how it became such a huge hit, and why it still resonates decades later.
I think one of the most interesting things about the movie is, well, it really has become this Thanksgiving tradition for so many people. It's almost as important as the turkey itself.
It really is like that extra slice of pie you can't resist.
Exactly.
But speaking of iconic, can you believe Steve Martin, the king of comedy himself, actually thought this movie would be a total flop?
Really.
Yeah.
That's Hollywood for you. I
Yeah.
guess always unpredictable. But I think that just goes to show how brilliant John Hughes, the director, really was.
Oh, absolutely.
The 80s were kind of like his comedic kingdom.
Yeah.
And he was just so good at capturing those awkward, relatable moments, whether it was in a high school setting or like in this case, like the crazy world of adults just trying to get by.
And he really did create some of the most iconic films of the 80s. I bet you've seen at least a few of them.
Oh, for sure.
But in planes, trains, and automobiles, he shifts gears a little bit. Instead of teenagers, we get Neil Page, this super uptight businessman.
Uh-huh.
And then there's Del Griffith, a shower curtain ring salesman, who's, let's just say, a little more free-spirited.
Yeah, you could say that. Their personalities, they clash right from the very beginning.
Mhm.
That sets the stage for this comedy of errors.
Total.
And it's all fueled by Dell's well-meaning but totally disastrous attempts to help Neil get home for Thanksgiving. They're kind of like the ultimate odd couple, but with a lot more turbulence along the way.
And those travel mishaps are legendary. Like, who can forget that burnt-out rental car?
Oh, yeah,
Or
yeah.
that train ride going in the wrong direction?
It's just a constant reminder that even the best laid plans can go completely off the rails in the most hilarious way possible.
Speaking of hilarious, we got to talk about that "those aren't pillows" scene.
Oh, come on. That scene is pure comedic gold. John Candy, like his timing, his facial expressions is just brilliant
It's one of those scenes that just gets funnier every time you watch it.
every single time.
But you know what's interesting? John Candy also brought this surprising depth to Del Griffith. He's not just this one-dimensional funny guy causing chaos.
You're right, yeah. That's where Hughes's writing really shines. You remember Dell's I Like Me monologue?
Oh, of course.
It's this really vulnerable moment, and it kind of flips the script. You suddenly see this, like, loneliness beneath the surface.
It really makes you stop and think about the people we meet in our own lives.
Mhm.
Are we taking the time to look past the surface, especially those people who might seem annoying or disruptive at first?
Yeah. It's a good reminder that even the most, well, frustrating travel companion might be carrying burdens that we know nothing about.
It really puts things into perspective, especially during the holidays when everyone's just trying to get where they need to be.
Exactly.
It's almost like the movie is saying, hey, it's okay to laugh at all this. We've all been there.
Yeah.
But it also kind of encourages us to be a little kinder, a little more understanding, even when things are chaotic.
It's a powerful message wrapped up in a really hilarious package.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of why this movie still resonates so strongly. It captures that universal experience of holiday travel stress, but it also reminds us about the importance of connection and empathy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And while we're talking about things that resonate, let's talk about the movie's soundtrack.
Okay.
It's this cool blend of like 80s synth and then, those heartfelt ballads. It almost mirrors the movie's own kind of mix of chaos and heartwarming moments. It's like John Hughes deliberately chose the music to make those emotional scenes hit even harder.
There's a real art to that,
Mhm.
for sure. It's not just background music. It's part of the story. And you can't talk about planes, trains, and automobiles without mentioning all those quotable lines. Those aren't pillows. It's just the beginning.
It really is amazing how many phrases from that film have become like part of our everyday conversations.
Right.
And it's not just the funny ones either. Like that "I like me" line has taken on a life of its own.
It's true.
It sparks all these conversations about self-acceptance and vulnerability.
It's fascinating how a line that seems so simple on the surface can become this, like, touchstone for deeper reflection.
Exactly. And again, I think that speaks to John Hughes's talent, his ability to write dialogue that works on so many levels. It's funny, it's quotable, but it also makes you think.
It does. It really does.
He had this amazing ability to find humor in those mundane everyday things, to turn those little annoyances into these relatable laugh out loud moments. But he also knew how to give those moments heart and meaning, which is why this film is still so powerful decades later.
So are we ready to move past just the laughs
Oh, yeah.
and really delve into what makes planes, trains, and automobiles more than just a hilarious road trip gone wrong?
Let's do it.
It's a story about finding connection in those really unexpected places and offers some pretty insightful reflections on how travel and human interaction have changed over the years.
Okay, before we get into all that, I have to share this bit of trivia. Do you know the original cut of the film was over 3 hours long?
3 hours.
Not
Wow. That's a serious commitment to Neil and Dell's misadventures.
right. Apparently, John Hughes loved his characters so much he just couldn't bear to cut anything. Makes you wonder what other comedic gems ended up on the cutting room floor.
It really shows you his dedication to crafting a story that felt authentic, that let those characters really breathe. But speaking of dedication, let's shift gears and talk about John Candy's performance. I mean, how he brought Del Griffith to life in such a memorable way. John Candy as Del Griffith, what a performance. Seriously, one for the ages. Hilarious and heartbreaking all at the same time. He makes you laugh 1 minute and then you feel for him the next.
It's true, and he was just so good at physical comedy, too, like those facial expressions and his delivery, perfect timing. No wonder Del Griffith is such a legendary character. But
Yeah.
what I find really interesting is how Candy brought this real vulnerability to Del.
You see those glimpses of it throughout the film, right? Little moments where that big boisterous personality kind of falters and you see this loneliness underneath. Maybe all that energy is just covering something up.
Yeah, like it's a defense mechanism or something to protect himself, from feeling like he doesn't belong. And that I like me scene, it's such a raw moment, like a crack in his shell.
It's brilliant acting, honestly.
Yeah.
He took what could have been a purely comedic role and gave it this whole other layer. Del Griffith becomes a real person,
Yeah.
flaws and all.
Yeah.
And that's why people connect with him, I think.
We all know a Del Griffith, right? Or maybe we've even been a Del Griffith at some point. We've all felt that need to be liked, to fit in, even if we go about it in kind of strange ways.
It's totally universal,
Yeah.
that need for connection, for acceptance. And the movie gets that. It shows us that sometimes the most meaningful connections come from these totally unexpected encounters.
And it's not just the characters that make this film so great. It's like a time capsule of the 80s, that era of travel. Think about it. No smartphones, no GPS, no internet for Neil and Del.
Right. Payphones, paper maps, and just figuring it out as they went along.
Imagine Del Griffith trying to book a flight on his smartphone today or using a rideshare app.
Oh, man. It'd be a whole other movie.
Huh.
But seriously, it shows how much things have changed.
And yet those core themes, they're still relevant. The stress of holiday travel, wanting to be home with family, those wrenches thrown into our plans, those are timeless. It doesn't matter when you were born or how you like to travel.
Exactly. That's why it's a classic. It goes beyond the 80s and speaks to something deeper about being human.
Mm-hmm.
And it does it with this perfect mix of humor and heart. Makes you laugh and think at the same time.
Okay, so it makes you think, right? It makes me wonder, with how connected we are today, are we more or less likely to connect with strangers in a meaningful way? What do you think?
That's a good question.
Uh,
I mean, we have so much information at our fingertips, ways to communicate that Neil and Del couldn't even dream of. But do we actually connect? We're so glued to
Yeah.
our devices. Maybe we miss those spontaneous moments, those chance encounters that could lead to something real.
Imagine, would Neil and Del even end up on that crazy road trip if they had all the tech we have today? Neil probably would just booked another flight, and Del would be scrolling through social media, not talking to strangers.
It's interesting to think about how technology shapes how we interact and even the kinds of stories we tell. But when you get down to it, planes, trains, and automobiles is about human connection. It's about looking past our differences and finding those little moments of kindness, even when everything's crazy and unpredictable.
And those are the moments that matter, right? It's not always about the destination. It's about the journey and the people we share it with.
Well said. And it makes me think about another reason why this movie endures. It's comforting, especially around the holidays. It brings people together.
It's true. It's a tradition for so many families and friends, a way to connect and laugh about those shared experiences of crazy travel and family gatherings. Even though the movie's set in the 80s, those feelings are universal.
It's like a warm hug when you need it most. A reminder that we're not alone in the chaos and that sometimes the best thing to do is just laugh about it.
Even in the middle of travel nightmares, burnt rental cars, and mismatched travel buddies, there's always something to be grateful for. And sometimes those unexpected detours end up being the most memorable parts of the trip.
And speaking of memorable, let's talk about the legacy of planes, trains, and automobiles. It's more than just a film. It's part of how we talk about travel, family, and the importance of connecting with each other.
It's wild how planes, trains, and automobiles has become so much more than just a movie.
It really has.
It's like woven itself into, I don't know, like our culture.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it reminds us to laugh when things go sideways.
Totally. It's become like this cultural shorthand, right,
Oh,
for
yeah.
all those travel headaches and those, heartwarming moments that kind of pop up out of nowhere.
Yeah. But what gets me is how it just keeps finding new fans, like generation after generation.
That's the mark of a great story. It never gets old.
It really is a timeless story, isn't it?
It is.
You don't even have to be an 80s kid or have had some crazy travel nightmare to connect with it.
Exactly. You don't have to have gone through exactly what they went through to get it.
It's all about those human experiences, the stuff we can all relate to.
It all goes back to John Hughes and how good he was at capturing those feelings, making those characters feel so real.
Yeah, and of course you can't talk about this movie without talking about John Candy as Del Griffith. He really made that character iconic.
Nobody else could have played Delarue.
Yeah.
Nobody.
It's hard to imagine, yeah.
He was born to play that role. The way he mixed that kind of over-the-top energy with those surprising, vulnerable moments.
Oh, yeah.
Candy was so good at making you laugh and cry, sometimes all at once.
He really was.
So much emotion just in a look, a gesture. That's why Del Griffith is still so beloved. He's this larger-than-life character who's also incredibly relatable.
I think it reminds us that even the people who annoy us the most,
Yeah.
well, they can surprise you.
They can have depth. They're human, just like us.
Yeah. It's like he's daring us to look past those first impressions, see the good, even when they're driving us crazy.
In a world that can feel so divided, it's a powerful reminder.
It really is. And I think that's what planes, trains, and automobiles does so well. It reminds us to roll with the punches, laugh at the craziness of it all, and appreciate the connections we make along the way.
And especially around the holidays, I think that's what people really connect with.
It's like comfort food for the soul. It's
Yeah.
become such a tradition, right? For families, friends to watch together and laugh about their own travel disasters.
Yeah, and all that family stuff. It might be set in the 80s, but those feelings, that stress, the excitement of getting home,
It's all still so relatable.
it's timeless.
It's like a warm hug, a reminder that we're not alone in all the chaos. And sometimes the best way to deal with it is to just laugh.
Exactly.
Even with burnt rental cars, wrong trains, and, a shower curtain ring salesman as your travel buddy, there's still good stuff to be thankful for.
Always something to be thankful for.
And sometimes those detours, those unplanned moments, turn out to be the ones you remember the most.
It's true.
So as you're getting ready for your own holiday travels this year, remember what planes, trains, and automobiles teaches us.
What's that?
Embrace the chaos, find the funny side of things, and appreciate those unexpected connections you make along the way. You never know. You might even find yourself chatting with a stranger in mismatched shoes carrying a giant bag of shower curtain rings.
Hey, you never know. Could be the start of a great story.
Exactly. And sometimes the best trips are the ones that don't go exactly as planned. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into planes, trains, and automobiles.
That was a fun one.
Until next time, happy travels and keep on deep diving.